This episode brought to you by Nomadic Research, built for the wild and forged in adversity. Somewhere between the front lines and the firelight, a vision was born. The founders of Nomadic Research spent years in the harshest environments on Earth, where grit and resilience weren't just words, but a way of life. They saw a need for gear that could handle anything, gear that wasn't just built, but built to last. From battlefields to backcountry trails, every piece of Nomadic Research gear is designed with one mission: unyielding performance for those who refuse to quit. The founders believe in patriotism, personal responsibility, and the freedom of the great outdoors, because adventure isn't just a weekend escape, it's a way of life. Born in the heart of Afghanistan, forged in adversity, and built for the wild, Nomadic Research is gear for those who go further. You can start your adventure at nomadicresearch.com.
No, there was a lot of drugs. So I think 18,000 kilos of opium and a lot of heroin. So one thing that was good for us, we only had 5 casualties on this mission, which is a miracle in itself, and no one died. We had all the aviation assets for this is what I was told, all the aviation assets for the theater for those 4 days and 5 nights. So it was an air show all day, every day. We had every aircraft you can think of dropping bombs, firing rockets. We had AC-130s flying over our heads at night. They did drop a bunch of bombs on the bazaar when we left. I think they told me it was either a B-52 strike or a B-1 strike. I mean, they leveled it, the whole bazaar, to make sure that all the trucks were gone.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the DTD podcast, Dynamic Tales Delivered. This week in the studio, Marine, DEA agent, DOD contractor. For over 30 years, he served in the shadows, leading interagency missions, using classified tech and defending America across every front. Please welcome into the studio, Tom Marble. What's going on, my friend?
Hey, DJ. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having me on. You've had some wonderful guests, so I really feel honored to be among them.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And I got to thank you. I was feeling pretty bad yesterday. I'm kind of on the mend today. So we made a quick shift right, and we made this happen today. So I'm very glad you did that and very appreciative of you. Your career has led to so many different things, not only law enforcement, but military. You've kind of crossed the boundaries on everything. And what I mean by cross the boundaries is you haven't just done law enforcement in the United States. You've also done it from a military aspect and not a military police way, where you've actually acted as a federal agent. So we have a lot to talk about your career and the things that you've done, but let's do like we always do and start back in the early days. What kind of made you push towards this life of service? Because it's been a very long life of service. And what kind of set you down this path?
I really have stumbled into all this, in all honesty. A lot of folks read a book or watch a movie that motivates them to join the military or law enforcement. I can't say that that's what happened with me. Like probably a lot of folks you've had on, I was a single mom. She raised me by herself. Didn't have a father in the picture. My half brother and half sister lived with us for a little bit. When my parents divorced, they moved away. So it was just my mom and me. And she really made me her priority, and try to put me in the Boy Scouts and things to try to give me a male role model. And growing up in El Paso, I probably could have gone the other way, if you will. But she worked for the government. My dad was in the Army, career Army. So I'm an Army brat. I was born in Heidelberg, Germany, when he was deployed over there. But he wasn't an influence at all. So the fact that I went in the military was something that happened because I, as a kid, got into science fiction. And as I was growing up, trying to figure out what you want to do, I wanted to be an astronaut, as crazy that might sound. My mom's friend, I consider my aunt, she worked for NASA. So she took me to a rocket launch out of Florida, and it was just really impressive. And as I liked science fiction, got into that and did research and realized that military pilots, Air Force, Navy, those were the astronauts. So I wanted to go in the military to be a pilot, really to potentially lead down to, lead into to NASA or something like that. That, but I sought out the academies. My backup plan was going to Texas A&M, which is I did make it in the academy, so I went there. I was in the Corps of Cadets, and that is where I discovered the Marine Corps. Really I had no influence, no family members. The movies I watched, I like all kids. I loved Rambo, but I just never saw myself as that guy. Never just I don't know. Didn't think that was in the cards for me. I got a flight contract in college. My plan was to go in the Navy, but then I changed to the Marine Corps. When I got commissioned and went into the Marine Corps, I was going through a flight examination, a physical. I had to take another one, and I missed 3 letters on an eye chart. So that disqualified me for flight training. Then I had to compete for a ground job, and in college, I really enjoyed going out in the field and patrolling, land navigation, firearms. I hadn't been exposed to that prior to college, and I was lucky that combat engineer was available when I picked my MOS. So I went into the combat engineer field and deployed to Okinawa and encountered special forces. We trained with them in the jungle, and I thought that was a really interesting and challenging job. But the Marine Corps didn't have anything like that, and I was a combat engineer, and it didn't seem like it would work out. Spent 8.5 years on active duty, and I just realized the trajectory of my career was I would be a staff officer. I would, more than likely spend a lot of time in an office setting away from Marines in the field. And I really enjoyed that. So that's when I thought about federal law enforcement. And there was a hiring freeze for a little while. I finally had an opportunity to apply for FBI, DEA, and I actually applied for LAPD as well. Went into their process. I was very impressed, very professional as far as how they bring people through their hiring program. And DEA offered me the job before LAPD. I got on with DEA in 1997 and got assigned to Phoenix, Arizona, where I worked for 10 years. And, that was how I got into law enforcement.
Well, I think it's interesting that you bring up the Marines and deciding that you would only have maybe a staff position later on and that you really wanted to stay out in the field. So you decided to go into federal law enforcement, which doesn't really correlate, I don't think, with each other. Yeah, I get it that you would be a staff officer, but going federal law enforcement, you have the possibility of not even being in command there. You could just be an agent or, there's a multitude of different ways that you could go down. So I'm kind of trying to figure out how you correlate the two with each other.
Well, I enjoyed command leadership, but it wasn't, there's folks that they always want to be in charge. That wasn't me. I actually found when I got into DEA and I got out in the field, I started off with the task force, a HIDTA task force in Phoenix. You're probably familiar with that in Dallas. And I was doing okay in the Marine Corps. I mean, I was, I had deployed, I had done some things, gotten good evaluations. I got to DEA. What I really enjoyed about being a criminal investigator was the whole intelligence development, the trying to find the adversary, figuring him out, building a case, running sources. I really enjoyed that. The first 4 months or so before I made my own case, I really thought I made a bad decision. Not the fact that I didn't like it. I just was struggling with that developing probable cause, understanding what's a good lead, what's a bad lead, what could get to an end result of a search warrant and arrest. I felt always, even in the Marine Corps, I was more of a coercive leader. I didn't just say you're going to do this because I'm the lieutenant. I try to explain to the Marines why we're doing something. I sought their input because a lot of people have ideas that could be better than mine on how to solve a problem. And in law enforcement, all the cases I've done, I've had partners, I've collaborated with other agencies. In fact, all my partners on the major cases have been somebody from a state and local or another federal law enforcement. So I want to say rarely have I been partnered with another DEA agent. And DEA is different, I believe, from the other major federal law enforcement. We really lean heavily on our task force officers and understanding that street level criminal activity and how to build a case. Um, Now, I've been out for a while. I think things have changed somewhat. I think we're far more reliant on technical means to collect evidence. I really enjoyed running sources, uh, doing old school surveillance, that type of thing. So uh, the leadership aspect, I think, does play in when you are trying to develop a group for an end state, to build a case and have it successfully conclude. So while it wasn't a leadership position, in fact, my whole time in DEA, it was never promoted to a leadership position. I've had different assignments where essentially that's what you are, but you don't necessarily get the pay or the title. So it did. There were some correlations.
Well, so what year is it that you're DEA in Phoenix? What year do you go there?
So I got there in '97 in, I want to say, June. And the time DEA's policy was you could not return to where you were hired out of. I was in San Diego as a Marine. That's where I had gotten out off active
Of
duty.
course.
I'd love to have gone back to San Diego. I love, Southern California and the weather, but DEA wouldn't do that. So I really did well getting Phoenix. I was there for 10 years from 2000 or from 1997 to 2007. But during that time, 9/11 happened, and that brought me back into initially the Army National Guard, which is kind of a odd story, and then into the Marine Corps Reserve just in time to go to Iraq in 2003 as a combat engineer. So during that time, from essentially 2002 to 2003, I was in the reserves and served in the reserves the whole time I was in DEA. And I'd been mobilized several times to deploy. So yeah, 10 years in Phoenix and then went to FAST from there, went through selection.
Okay, so let's talk about when you first get there though, 97. So in 97 Phoenix, because I got to around Tucson, I was in the Fort Huachuca area in 2000. I guess I got there in 2000. 2000, yeah, 2000 or 2001. What was the drug problem that you were seeing? Because I think at that time it was cocaine that was coming across the border down by Nogales and stuff like that. What was the big one that you were seeing in Phoenix?
So methamphetamine,
Okay,
absolute meth.
from the super labs down in Mexico.
Yeah, well, so the super labs, they were hit and miss. Meth had
Okay,
really hadn't caught on um, to be the big cash cow it is now. I got there, like I said, '97. I was assigned to the Clan Lab task force, so that's all we did was target meth labs. Most of them were somewhat what we called mom and pop, red phosphorus reduction method, the red P. If you're familiar with methamphetamine, still I'm sure being cooked that way now. Typically ounces size labs, but it's still a problem. And the tweakers would essentially steal for money or steal pseudoephedrine, the chemicals used to make meth, and then would get it to a cook, and the cook would cook it up, and we targeted the cooks. But that was absolutely the problem. We did my unit, which we did crazy number of labs in the 2 years I was there. Um, it's an estimate. I did well over 200 meth labs. Some of them were just responses where we would get called out by the state and locals because we were trained, equipped to handle them. They're very hazardous. I did do a super lab, and the definition at the time of a super lab was something that could cook 10 pounds or more at a whack. And we got a guy who's a white guy who had been very well established and been cooking for a while out in Glendale, which is the city right next to Phoenix, essentially one big metro area. And then a partner of mine, he did a Mexican super lab, which Mexican nationals, AK-47s, the whole 9 yards. So that was the early 2000s is when the Mexican lab started, cranking out speed in larger quantities and bringing it across. And then we had the law passed in 2005, the Meth Control Act, which made everyone have to go get their driver's license to only buy 2 packages of Sudafed at a time. So,
Do you remember your first case in Phoenix?
yeah, I do. Struggling to get a case. I'm with these veteran cops who are just like knocking guys down left and right, and I'm not thinking, how in the world am I going to find the time to build a case? We had the FTA, a field training agent program, similar to regular FTO programs in law enforcement. The agent assigned to me, nice lady, didn't know how to make a case herself, so I was kind of on my own. I did trash rip. People don't talk about that in law enforcement, in the brochure to join DEA, digging through someone's trash, but I got really good at digging through trash. And this one guy had all the components for a meth lab in his trash, and we hit it. Interesting time. We'd have a SWAT team. The state SWAT team would do the the typical breach and assault because of the hazards. Not so much. I mean, the bad guys are all violent, but it's really the chemical hazards. And these guys,
Right.
the best SWAT team I've ever worked with, the DPS SWAT team, they would go in on an SCBA, so on air, and phenomenal guys. So that was the first case. And then from then on, you kind of build on that, the momentum. You start getting the hang of the intuition. It's really hard to explain. There's guys that never get it, how to make, they struggle and struggle and they're good guys, but they just can't seem to follow up on the right leads, work the right informants. But yeah, that was my first case. Nothing big, nothing fancy.
When is it that you realize though, when you do that operation, when is it that you realize like, yeah, this is I made the right decision leaving the Marines, coming over here? Is it at that time or is it later on?
So I felt pretty good about that. I would tell you where I really, I guess the TV shows, what you kind of really expect on that job, is a case that the super lab case I was telling you, I mentioned to you. I had a partner with Glendale Police Department, um, a wonderful female detective. I mean, squared away. And I would partner really well with folks that were detail oriented because sometimes I'm kind of like a wild man running around working angles. She and we did had the informant, tracking devices, beacons on cars, surveillance aircraft. We did reverse of chemicals for this cook, a large amount, which at the time the federal government probably wouldn't have let that walk. We walked enough chemicals to cook 10 pounds, which just the procedures you have to go through federally at that time. I can't imagine what it is now, but we followed this guy all night. We knew it would be that way because this guy was notorious for doing counter surveillance runs, heat runs, which is why we had the aircraft and the tracking device on his car. But we had a guy rolling. We practiced on a car like it, and he pulled up his car to load the chemicals from a hotel room through the window. We had a surveillance camera in there and the informant. Guy rolled out, slapped the tracker on the car, literally in like a minute. And thank God we had that, because we lost him on surveillance. We had 2 surveillance teams on this guy, and we lost him at one point. But the tracking device, and I'm driving around with my partner, who we had 3 radios. We had the DEA radio, the Glendale police radio, and I want to say the radio with the National Guard plane. So it was chaos, and we took a moment during this just shit show, and we giggled because we both were like, "Holy cow! This is exactly what you dream of as a special agent cop." And we followed him down to the lab, and it was crazy time. 2 days before Christmas, I was smoked, but I tell you, the fulfillment after that was just unbelievable.
Well, and you got to think too, how young are you in your career? Because if you're running operations like that, where you're using air assets, slap trackers, all of that kind of stuff, that's a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot of money being put into this operation. Were you ever worried during the operation that, like, oh man, if this doesn't go right after transferring all of the product and everything like that, was that ever a worry on your mind?
Probably should have been. It wasn't. I think everyone was bought into this guy. Was kind of he's literally called Glendale Rick. He was a legend in Glendale. So Glendale was 100%. I think we got all their narcs for that 3 days. It was a wealth of overtime because it's a hideout. So there's like unlimited overtime. So there's some guys that make extra money doing it. I didn't get any pushback. Now, because I had a Maricopa County Sheriff's Department boss, that's who I wrote paper, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office paper. We would do kind of summary reports for DEA. So they would track the stat, but it was through the HIDA. So he was good with it. Once again, if headquarters DEA knew exactly what we're doing, they may have pushed back. But with the task force, that's how it's kind of set up. That would have been a really bad form for DEA to say, "Oh, wait a second." But yeah, I wasn't kind of interesting. My career, I was not loved by management, but I also made cases. It's kind of like plausible deniability, maybe. I don't know.
How do you feel your career progress in DEA from '97? I would say for probably the first year you had trouble even making cases. How do you feel it progress, and when does it kind of take off? Other than that super lab operation, when do you see your career kind of start to take off?
So that start in the task force was probably the best. It was brutal. The hours were brutal, but I learned very, very quickly. Great mentors with the state and local guys. So I did that case there, then moved to the mobile enforcement team, which is another ball buster. We would deploy throughout the state, helping state and locals. So another task force set up. I did a couple of investigations with them. And then I had some OCDF cases, organized crime drug enforcement task force cases that were international. So within, that 4 years, 97 to 9/11, yeah, I was doing more and more complex investigations. I was getting awards. I would get, bonus money every year. The thing that really made me feel good was I got promoted early to 13, the journeyman level. And in those days, it was tough. There was like limited quotas nationwide, and you had to put a package together of all your investigations, and you had to be endorsed by your management, and it had to go up to headquarters. And so arguably I was doing well. And then 9/11 happened, and that kind of derailed some things. So
Did DEA make any kind of, because we've heard recently with all the ICE stuff going on, where a lot of agencies are kind of focusing their stuff to help out the immigration policy and all that kind of stuff. After 9/11, did you see DEA change over to backing kind of an anti-terrorism mission?
So it's an interesting thing. So 9/11 happened, like all of us were just dumbfounded, and we shut down drug ops because we're all waiting, leaning forward on what are we going to do. And I remember being called in the next day to the Saks office, and it was weird because it was really no explanation why he called us in. I've never been to the Saks office. He's up on the top floor. I knew him. He obviously supported me in my career, but I don't hang out with bosses. And he's old school. He was in the army, I think, back in maybe Vietnam, but he's a New Yorker, Miami Vice. He did stuff. I mean, he's like the stereotypical, Italian suit, punch you in the mouth type of guy. And
Right.
he had these guys in there, and I'm looking in this room, and I knew pretty much, oh, I knew everybody. It wasn't that big of an office. They were all from different groups, and they were all the pipe hitters. It was like if you wanted somebody, to use a term, whacked, we use a lot of mobster terms at DEA. Those are the guys you're going to pick. So I'm
Right.
thinking, well, this is odd. He comes in there and he goes, "Hey, FBI has asked us for help." So I said, "Whatever they want," and they want some guys. So you're going to them. I don't know what you're going to do. Pack your cars. You're going to be gone. I don't know how long you're going to be gone. You're going to do whatever they tell you to do. You may not go home, set square away your home. It was like going on deployment. And I was pumped because, we all wanted to do something. Loaded up my car and ready to go, super motivated. And the next day, I get word, yeah, they don't need us. And, it was really frustrating, right? So that was probably a catalyst for why I really sought to get back in the Marine Corps Reserves, because during that, the next at least 2 years, we were just, okay, well, we got to do the drug things. I tell you what, we did do that week or so after 9/11, we got the word from FBI, all wiretap investigations involving Arabs, Muslims. I don't know what the criteria were. Take them down. It's a big deal to get those established, and it's a lot of money involved. Our office, like, sure, whatever it takes. So we took down a case involving, I don't know if he was Muslim or he was a Mexican linked to Muslims. It was part of the super lab case. A lot of the pseudoephedrine was being sold by convenience stores out the back door, and there's a lot of Muslims, a lot of Arabs involved in that. So we took it down, and I had an FBI guy ride with me, and for no it was literally so he could search this guy's house and check his phone, and if there was anything remotely linked. So we gave up. We burned all our cases, related to Arabs, and I don't think anything came of it. But we were absolutely DEA. My office was literally would do anything to help, but it was limited.
Well, I think that though that paid off later on in your career, because if I'm correct, with the DEA, you went over and deployed into Afghanistan for anti-drug operations. Is that correct?
Yeah. So DEA created in 2004, I believe. They started seeing the funds generated by predominantly heroin out of Afghanistan and how that's funding the Taliban. And they created FAST, the Foreign Deployed Advisory Support Team. And the first iteration, it kind of like anything, they're in a rush to get it going. They pick guys based on resumes. They sent out a message, and at that time, that was 2005. I was now in the reserves. I had done a deployment to Iraq, so that whole, I've done my war tour. I didn't feel the need to do that again. And in all honesty, I wasn't confident that the program would be set up well, and I knew it would be dangerous. So I chose not to put in that first time, and I ended up deploying with the Marines, and then I did try to put in with fast, just because I kind of had overstayed my welcome, if you will, in Phoenix. I needed to move. I'd been there almost 10 years, and that was really the only way I was getting out. The bosses, while they weren't fans, they liked that I would make cases and seize stuff. So I was probably would have stayed in Phoenix my whole career, and we wanted to move. So that was my only way out to get to Quantico, Virginia. So I put in for selection. And so they learned, DEA learned some really hard lessons that first year or so with the problems they were having. So they decided to go to SOCOM, and SOCOM funded and provided resources to DEA to train and assess and equip the agents to deploy overseas. And that was what I joined, went through selection in 2006 in El Paso, Texas, back home, if you will, in the desert north of Fort Bliss. 8 weeks selection, and it was tough. Having been through the Marine Corps, that was a legitimate selection course officially run by the DEA agents in FAST, but we had a Special Forces ODA there from 3rd Special Forces Group, and they pretty much led the way. And I believe that Team Sergeant Pete fundamentally set the trajectory for FAST to be successful as it was, because they weren't going to tolerate people, not hackers, getting through. Because he realized we would potentially be working with them, and you want to have the guys that are suited.
So I don't want to break any operational security, but can we talk about going into FAST and what it kind of takes to get through that program, to get through the selection course?
Well, I absolutely. Unfortunately, FAST was disbanded in 2017. There was some controversial shootings that occurred in Honduras. I wasn't there. The shootings happened in 2012, the same year I left FAST. So that's not something I, should really have anything to talk about other than what I've seen on the internet. But yeah, so with the selection I went through, I missed a lot of the preliminary emails that they sent to all the candidates to prepare. They gave them training courses they could do physically, and some of the things you would be evaluated on, much like the Army, Rangers, Marines, that type of thing. I was fortunate. I had just spent 6 months on active duty through Marines, working with actually a force reconnaissance unit. So I was training a lot every day. If I probably wouldn't have passed if I hadn't done that, because I was an older guy. But the first week was what we kind of call Hell Week, and you show up and model after special operations selections. Ahead of time that you're going to have to take a PT test. It's the standard DEA PT test, and we all know what those push-ups, sit-ups, 2-mile run, shuttle run. You got to pass with a certain score. There was a 5-mile run. You have to pass with a certain time. You got to do a timed ruck march with a 50-pound pack, but you don't know some of the times, you don't know some of the other times, and you don't know when they're going to happen. And in fact, there was no schedule. We had a whiteboard that was in the hallway of this barracks we lived in. And at some point in the night, the cadre would come out and put the time, show time, and the equipment. And that's what you had to follow. So we would have, after the first day, we had a fire watch. So the fire watch it's crazy. We would figure out what made sense. So the fire watch would say, okay, if they tell us before 10 o'clock at night, because we're smoked, right? We're getting up really early. We'll let you all know. We'll pass the word. If it's after 10 o'clock, we will wait until 1 hour prior to, and then we'll wake you all up and tell you what it is. So, you're getting a little sleep deprived. We did a water survival test. We did one thing that we did that was different than what I actually was fortunate enough that we worked with the Army's Asymmetric Warfare Group. I don't know if you heard of AWG, but their selection sergeant major, if you will, the guy who runs their selection, I became friends with because we'd worked with them. I asked him to evaluate our selection course, and he was also the Delta Force selection sergeant major back in the day. And he looked at what we did and he said, "Yeah, this is pretty good." And he asked the question, "Why do you make them shoot? Why do you make them qualify with their pistol and rifle?" Because we don't do that. We can teach people to shoot. We have them do land navigation, which we didn't do. And our philosophy was you've got to master the basics. You're all required to shoot to qualify with your pistol and rifle as a DEA agent. So we expect you to qualify with those under stress and at a higher score, which is what we did. And so they're fatigued. They had to wear gear, and they shoot the qual course. They get 3 attempts. Uh, at, you had to shoot an 80. I think the requirement was an 80 on the pistol, which at that time, the DEA pistol qualification course started at the 50-yard line. You had to shoot 10 rounds prone at the 50-yard line on a bottle target, and it's 100 rounds, and you had to move closer, and they were doing facing. It's a hard qual test. So, and then we had to qualify with the M4. So that was something that was different than your typical military, gut check, if you will. And then we had peer evals, very similar to the military, and rotating billets, leadership billets, and we would then start getting trained. So you're getting evaluated on the training. So it's a selection course, but it's also a training course. We do close quarters battle with live fire, which DEA agents don't normally do. A lot of people don't realize that cops, do simunition. They don't do live fire CQB. And the military guys were shocked when we told them that. They're like, "What? You're carrying guns and you're doing warrants in the States and you've never done live fire in a shoot house?" So it was a really, really good program. And we had psych evals. So we had a psychologist come out and evaluate us. We'd do tests and they would make a recommendation. Then we had to go through a board, a selection board, where they really wanted to harass me because they were asking me, "Hey, you're a Marine officer. You think you know everything? What about this guy that wasn't in the military?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a DEA agent. I'm not here as a Marine. So, and some guys struggle with that. They struggle to separate the fact that, hey, we are DEA agents. Yes, we're training with the military. We work with them, but we're not special forces. We're not Navy SEALs. We're not Marines. You support them, but be a good criminal investigator who's not a burden to them when they execute, a high risk target. Either we're supporting them or they support us."
Well, can we talk about what the difference is? Because you said when you worked DEA in Phoenix, you were working with the state police, you were working with local police, other federal agencies. What's the difference when you're working with the military in a forward area like, say, Afghanistan, like, say, Iraq? How do your role change as a special agent?
Well, we have to follow. So one thing that's interesting that I've tried to explain to folks, and there's been some questions about the current administration designated Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations and targeted them with the military. So I operate under Title 21, which is the Federal Controlled Substances Act. It empowers us to arrest people in the states and overseas, but we can only do that at their request and invitation of the host country. Unlike Title 10 military, you're there functioning on a different capacity. And so while we have some of the same rules, I would tell you we're far more stringent than ours as far as, all the checklists they have to accomplish before they can do a mission. I mean, we still have a lot of the same things because it's a dangerous environment. The thing that I saw, this is my opinion, who I worked with, and I only worked with special forces. I did not work with conventional with one exception. Based on one area, I did do a couple missions with the Marines, and I'm very biased, so I'm probably not the best person to, you know, you know how Marines are. But there is a very similar um, culture, I guess, that as far as just get the job done with special forces and the Marines. The military, the officers, the OPSOs, the operations officers I dealt with when we were trying to work early on, and it changed over time. Every deployment was different from 2007 to my last one in 2012. It was, you almost had to talk them into it. They really didn't want to deal with this drug thing. It's like, hey, we're gonna like piss off the locals. We don't want to deal with that. It's their economy, and that's not the answer. But it, it's slowly after each year, it was different guys, of course, but institutionally, they started to get it that, hey, you're not going to solve this problem without dealing with the funding, and it's the drugs. Um, so 2008, we did a major case, which actually was the largest bulk drug seizure in history, 262 metric tons of hash,
Holy
not
shit.
not opium, but hash. And we're all there for heroin. That's what you think about. Afghanistan, like, cultivated 40% of the world's marijuana. One country, the most abused drug in the world. It's a huge crop. It's just bulky and hard to move. We did this mission with the British Special Boat Service, who are phenomenal guys. They've been doing counter drug stuff the whole time there. That that's the irony. The Brits placed that level of emphasis on it with putting their tier one units, the SAS and SBS, and the United States, most powerful country, we train up a couple of DEA agents and say, go for it. It just, I thought, interesting, right? So uh, after that, I think a lot of light bulbs went off. And that's when we did this other mission to Marja in 2009. Very significant special operation with SEALs and Green Berets and us. Seized a lot of dope, killed a lot of Taliban. So there were elements. I mean, it's all political, and we're doing whack-a-mole. You got the corrupt government, which didn't seem like that was being handled at all. Not that wasn't our lane. That was the frustrating thing is we knew I had one case, the hash case, where I had a Afghan police commander dead to rights. I had 10 witness statements that we could have done him in the States. We could have extradited him to the US and convicted him as a drug trafficker. But I was told, no, not this guy. So we kind of hamstring ourselves.
Okay, so let's talk about that though. Let's not breeze over that. So when you're told no, not this guy, can you talk about the reasons of why? And once again, we don't want to get into the operational security, but was there a reason why not this guy? Was he good for something else down the road? And then to kind of tie on to that, I want you to explain why it's so important to take down the money aspect of the terrorist activity.
Uh, so intelligence collection in Afghanistan, human intelligence is to me the most valuable. Obviously, we had signals collection going on. You had another agency, another U.S. agency collecting on some of the same people we were, if you will, not law enforcement. And you can probably figure out who that is. Uh, they're the big boys. They get what they want, whether it's, you know, helpful or not. Very frustrating. I thought we could have done a lot more if we worked together. Um, I have my opinion. Interestingly enough, that commander was eventually killed. He was assassinated later on. So, hey, did he save American lives? No idea. But he was a drug trafficker. And he wasn't the only one. But yeah, it is. There's a lot of food fights going on, unfortunately, between the federal agencies and other branches of government, or I should say departments and agencies. And the guys on the ground is never an issue. Never an issue. It's always the bosses. Always the bosses. But your second comment was the funding.
I don't think people understand just how important it is
Yeah.
about putting someone in jail versus taking their money and stopping the operation from that angle.
So, as a DEA agent, my perspective, not only is that, so when you capture somebody alive, you can interrogate them, hopefully collect intelligence, maybe get them to work for you. But that disrupts the organization a lot more than you just whacking the guy. He gets replaced. If he's killed, he's replaced that fast. So you have greater effect on the target. The funding, and to give you an example of the money, I sat in a JSOC brief. I was invited. I should say FAST was invited. I was the only guy who showed up. Everyone was busy. Drove down to Bragg, and the commander wanted to know. He was trying to think out of the box. Hey, what are ways we can get after external threats to Afghanistan? Essentially, what's feeding the conflict in Afghanistan? And he had all these people there. All there. No one's in uniform. Everyone's first names. And I'm the odd guy, and I'm trying to meet people. And my little card says DEA Fast on it. He says on a VTC, "Hey, I want to look at improving our human network like the DEA." He says that in this huge brief. So I'm thinking, man, I'm
You
going to be the
stand up
most
and bow.
yeah, I'm going to think I'm going to be the most popular guy in this brief, right?
Right.
Crickets after that. Everyone kind of turns to what they know and what they're used to, and this no one. It's like it's the craziest thing. Um, so running sources, getting people into the networks is key, but the funding. So back to the funding. In that same conference where I was going with this, somebody, this intel analyst from the CIA, he asked the I think the question was, what's the revenue being generated by drug trafficking? And so I've done 3 tours there. I've done some big cases, and I don't know. I have an idea, but this lady, she's she goes, "Oh, I'm so and so. I'm Janet from CIA, and we estimate that the Taliban is generating $700 million annually from the proceeds, whatever." And I'm making up the number. I don't know, but it was millions. I'm pretty confident it was in millions. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's not right. And the reason I said I knew that wasn't right was that hash case, that 262 metric tons, it was being packaged to go to the UK and to France. They had potato chips bags. So out in the middle of nowhere in this desert, they had generators running, and they were processing the raw hash, and they were marking it. They'd have special stamps to like branding, essentially branding the items, different flavors. I don't know. And they would then secrete those items in, I can't remember the brand. It's a British brand, like Lay's potato chips. So imagine like the Ziploc bag, or the bag you buy in the store, but there's hash inside it. So we knew it was going to the UK and to France. When I say they, the UK law enforcement estimated the value of that, the street value, when it got to the UK, at close to $1 billion, $950 million.
Shit.
So that's one hit of hash. So there's no way in the world that the annual proceeds, and that was probably one season's worth of hash. We were very lucky. We're talking billions of revenue generated. And that money, so the Taliban, they're extorting the farmer. The poor farmer is just doing it because he doesn't want to be killed. He gets a few bucks out of it. They harvest it, then they move it to Pakistan. So the Pakistan drug dealer gets some money because he then gets it on a dhow. The dhow people, the people driving the boats, they get some money. It goes to Yemen or Somalia. It's Yemen and then Somalia. those guys, terrorists who are protecting it, get it from point A to point B, they're making money off of it. Goes up through Libya, they're making money. So what do all those places have in common? They're shitholes. So that funding is not just benefiting the Taliban, it's benefiting uh, Boko Haram potentially, uh, Al Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula, all these other bad people, and then the gangs, the criminal gangs in the UK and France. So it is a huge issue, and it corrupts officials because they're paying off various officials to not take the loads, just like in the States. So it is absolutely that was the mechanism to end the things differently in Afghanistan.
So did you see a switch in operational capacity when you take down that large hash uh, operation? Did you see a slowdown in terrorist activity? Did you see anything like that where you could make a direct correlation?
So unfortunately, we were on 4-month deployments. I would rotate out while I'd like to stay with the case. And when I came back the year later, we tried to pick up on doing some uh, Operation Albatross was the name of it. We tried to pick up on some remnants of that because that once you that's a big hit to them, but it doesn't like completely crush the organization. So if that is the place where they do things, they're going to do things the next year.
Of
And
course.
we couldn't find the big loads. Unfortunately, what we do is we make them smarter. They disperse their operation. It does definitely increases their operational costs, but they're businessmen. They're going to figure out a way to get it done. I can't tell you specifically for that one because I was not following up on the intel. There was other agencies involved. As I told you, I don't know. A lot of times the information we would generate, I'd write a report and it would go one way and go to other intel agencies, and I would not hear anything back. Um, the next year when we did hit Marja for Siege Engine, I was told by the Army Special Forces, so they were really focused on that, on the intel. They said that undermined dramatically that fighting season. So according to the Army Special Forces intelligence, that event absolutely did. It reduced their ability to pay foreign fighters, to feed and clothe their fighters. So it did have it reduced that effect for the remainder of 2009 and into 2010, which is when actually the Marine Corps moved into Marja for their big operation.
Well, when you're over there, of course you're different because you're a DEA agent, but you're working with all military. What are kind of your thoughts when you're on the ground? Because you have a different mission, but not really, because you're in the end helping out with the military's operation. So how do you approach that in everyday life there? Because you have to play both roles very well.
So some of the cases I like making cases. So when I got there, I sought out leads. So I would go to the Intel Fusion Center and start building cases. Like Albatross actually was started by a really good friend of mine, a fast agent who was on the deployment before me. So he gave me the leads. So not too different than the U.S. I started with the leads and then developed it and went to the Air Force OSI and it was very familiar to me as like it would so it's Air Force OSI, but to me that would be like going to Glendale Police Department. I go to the Special Forces, that's like going to Phoenix Police Department. I so I would go around and find willing participants and build this task force. So it was very familiar. Uh, those were the cases that were DEA fast led. We had a lot of cases that were either generated by the DEA agents at the Kabul office, which is more the traditional role of DEA in a foreign country. They're in the embassy. So they work with their counterparts and develop leads, and they would push stuff down to us. And then we had the military because you know, it, the whole world, the soft world, guys will kind of crack on each other's services, but they're all the same guy. You know, the cultures are a little different, Marine, SF, Ranger, SEAL, but it's kind of the same guy. You know, we all get along, but there you got to prove yourself. So we're unknown. We're a bunch of, you know, federal agents. Once we established our reputation, either by my team or by the organization, which it did, those selection courses we were going through, we were producing really good guys, good agents. That big mission that I went on in Marja, they took my whole team, which is weird. Why do you need to take 10 DEA agents on a 4-day firefight when you probably could get another ODA or some more SEALs or get somebody? Because they all wanted, it was like the Super Bowl going on this thing because the threat level was insane. And
Well, let's talk about that mission. Let's start at the beginning of that mission because I think it's important to talk about.
so the quick video thing I sent you, that's some combat camera footage of that. We got in early. This is 2009. May 19th was the day one of the op. We got in country the beginning of May, and the team before us, so we would like rotate every 4 months. New team would go in. The team before us had been working with special forces, and they've been doing shaping operations in Helmand, just quick hits, which is the typical thing. We'd go in a period of darkness, exploit the target during the day, and then fly out in darkness, the IED threat and that type of thing. So this was, their intel had determined this one bazaar was the control center for the Taliban, the shadow government, the drug trafficking, everything right there in one spot. However, they had anti-aircraft guns in the area, supposedly a lot of Taliban fighters. They took out the anti-aircraft guns, is what they told us on the brief. But then they're saying, yeah, we think there could be 1,000 to 2,000 Taliban, and it's going to be so hairy that take 2 days of supply and typically take 1 day of supply and you get resupplied at night. They're saying,
so it sounds like they were planning on another Black Hawk Down.
They thought, yeah. So in the brief, and I remember this brief, it's like it was yesterday. I thought it was almost like a joke, you know, that they're briefing this thing. Yeah, we anticipate 10% casualties, and you know we're going to have probably can't reinforce you the first day. I'm like, what? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing it this way? If it wasn't even so much a special forces mission. You're like doing this like an infantry, like a ranger mission. Like you put in, you know, a company or a battalion of Marines and just lay waste to everybody. That's not. It's just. I was upset, in all honesty. I'm like, this is not what we do. You know, we do SSE, we do sensitive site exploitation. So the other team was going, three guys, they're maniacs. They're like, yeah, we're staying. So their team rotated back to the States, and these guys wanted to go so bad, they're staying. And they're like, okay, you're going, we're going. You know, we're not going to have some DEA agents go and we're going to sit back and
right
in this hairy thing. So we all went. And but kind of back to what roles were, there's a funny thing. They paired me with one of their new guys on our brother ODA, and they had worked with us before, my team specifically, this one ODA. So we're friends with them. And they put a couple of us on the worst spot. And we were getting shot at all the time. In fact, one of their guys got shot on the top of the mosque. And there was at one point in one of the firefights where we knew it was going to happen, and they brought their machine gun in. The new special forces guy on the ODA. They're like, "Hey, John, we gotta go do SSE. Come on, let's go." And I'm sitting there, like, what? I'm a DEA agent. That's what I do. You know, I do SSE. That's why I'm here. You're like, nah, Tom. He's a new guy. He needs to learn this. we know you know. I'm like, what? Yeah, stay on the machine gun. So yeah, they made me the machine gunner. So it's kind of I would say a backhanded compliment, that they felt comfortable to do that. And then there was a lot of other things that they were pulling fast guys out to do stuff that their ODA guys would be doing. And we got very close with them. We later did missions with other countries, special ops guys, and once you break through that initial, well, who are you and what can you do? It worked out. The problem was they become your brothers, so you want to do what they need, and some guys would lose sight of that. Hey, I'm not a Green Beret. I'm not a SEAL. I'm not an Australian commando. I'm a DEA agent. I need to make cases, you know. So, that was kind of the struggle we had with some of the guys.
So let's go back to this operation though. Once you get in there, once you go through the briefing and you see that everything's going to happen, what exactly was it that was your job and the other fast team guys' job while this mission was going on?
That's a really good question. Like, hey, Tom, I want you to collect up all the opium and get phones and yeah, nope. You're gonna go with the machine gun team. So I was assigned me initially, so it changed, right? Nothing, no plan survives contact with the enemy. It's one of our Marine Corps sayings. So when on infill, I was assigned to the machine gun team and the the warrant officer to the ODA. 3116 was our brother ODA. He would his job is he's the second in command, but he also does the intelligence collection. We had the 18 Fox, who's the intel guy, and also a JTAC. So they put me in with the element that was a machine gun team and collecting intel. So I suppose I was there to, if they got some kind of good drug intel or something that they thought, I could help with, I would be involved with that. I mean, that kind of makes sense. It wasn't ever like specified, this is what you're going to do. And then but then it changed, right? So we had a casualty taken. The one spot on the mosque was just getting hammered. So then I was me and two other fast guys, and my boss. We reinforced I think the worst spot on that whole mission. There's this high building with a minaret, so it was like an
Right.
aiming point for the enemy. We just got shot at all the time. So from then on, I'm literally like a Marine in the defense. I'm looking for targets, pulling triggers, getting on the machine gun, shooting grenades with the grenade launcher. Yeah.
So no drug at all was involved in this operation. No, I mean,
No, there was a lot of drugs. So I think the 18,000 kilos of opium and a lot of heroin. So there were breaks, right, in the firefight, and there was a point I left the mosque with my partner, my fellow DEA fast guy, Brian, and we were like rummaging for stuff because we were like getting cooked on the roof there. And I'm a DEA agent. So I start looking around for stuff, and uh, they had two FBI agents that went on the mission too, and their focus was counterterrorism stuff, which makes sense. That's what the FBI does. Well, they somehow turned into DEA agents. They were doing the counterterrorism stuff, but they were like counting all the drugs. It was so strange. I ran into some of the leadership and I said, okay, you need help with this stuff, the destruction of it, and that was a little bit of a drama there because they didn't really plan for that. That to destroy all those drugs, it takes time, and you just don't blow it up. You need to burn it. Blowing it up just scatters it. Um, so it was a learning experience for a lot of people, and like I said, I think they just kind of they saw us as a bunch of shooters, and yeah, and there was other missions that we've gone on that, yeah, we became shooters. Um, Great.
And I get that, but here's the question that I got to ask, because this is the one that keeps coming to my head. Let's say DEA Phoenix, okay? You're back in the States, you exploit a site, you execute a search warrant, you do all of your stuff to end this case, right? You have to take the time to clean that site, secure everything, seize everything that you're going to seize. If you're in the middle of a 4-day firefight, it's a little hard to either destroy or to seize all of those items. So you got to explain how you take the time in between a firefight and stuff to not only watch, your six and everything that's going on in that operation, but in also destroying the stuff that you're finding, because you can't just pick it up and take it back with you.
Yeah. So, there's a video that I have where it shows them burning it. They they didn't ask me, but they figured it out. What they did is they collected all this wet opium, and on this road, uh, they would just set the bags up, and then they used a local vehicle, and they drove around a pickup truck, and they just had the Afghans. So we went with a partner force. They would, a lot of them were the labor, and then the video I saw, because I never did this. That's the irony of it. I'm a DEA agent. You think my hands would be helping them destroy the drugs.
That's
There
what I
were
would
other,
think.
yeah, so I can only speak for my position, the four guys I was with. There were other guys I think helping out, but because I'm going to make an assumption here, because we were in such the beaten spot, no one wanted, people figured, hey, you're busy, so they didn't call on us, I guess. But yeah, it was a methodical thing. It took a while. It, and I told them, you realize when you're burning this opium, you know, there may be some contaminants in the air, and I don't know where it's blowing, and it's going to burn for a while. And like, oh yeah, hmm. I mean, it got done. The, it was so bad at the end. We had so one thing that was good for us. We only had 5 casualties on this mission, which is a miracle in itself, and no one died. We had all the aviation assets for this is what I was told, all the aviation assets for the theater for those 4 days and 5 nights. So it was an air show all day, every day. We had every aircraft you can think of dropping bombs, firing rockets. We had AC-130s flying over our heads at night. Um, they did drop a bunch of bombs on the bazaar when we left. I think they told me it was either a B-52 strike or a B-1 strike. I mean, they'd like leveled it, the whole bazaar, um, to make sure that all the trucks were gone. But yeah, it was very surreal.
Well, I know you probably didn't see the whole thing. How much weight do you think of drugs was in that location?
So what I saw on the estimate, it was 18,000 kilos of wet opium, and I don't that sticks in my mind. I'm sure I have it somewhere in my notes of how much heroin was found and poppy seed. So they had just harvested the opium. So a lot of that wet opium was going to be processed, which we got to, early on. It was right after harvest season. But the other thing is that was there, and I haven't mentioned, is they had a little command center, Taliban command center with maps and everything. And then they had a first aid station right next to it, a little hospital. And there was bandages and blood and stuff. And then they had a room full of RPGs and ammo and mortars. And I still don't know. When we landed, we encountered nothing. So I'm assuming it was a complete surprise. It was just weird that there was no one there. I mean, no one when we landed. Seemed like, I'm sure they
But
heard the
they,
helicopters, but
of
they,
course.
maybe someone was there. They hauled ass. It, so surprise was just absolutely complete. And then they came and fought us for 4 days.
When do you think the most fear in your entire career you had? Was it stateside? Was it overseas? When do you think you felt the most fear that you've ever felt?
So I've been kind of asked this about, and this kind of stems into PTS. So I going to the Marines, I was never the first time I never saw combat. We did a lot of training. We had an accident, some loss of life, very dangerous type of things.
Different world though. That was a
It
different
is, but
Marines.
I think I really do believe in stress inoculation. You know, that's a thing. It's a real thing. I remember in DEA when I first got in there, the first few warrants where we're kicking doors and pointing guns at people, that was my anxiety was really high. I will tell you a time that really was completely unexpected. It was unexpected and overwhelming. So maybe that was the fear was when I was in Iraq in 2003 running the police. We became the police. We were going out in town and we had this battle rhythm as we go to the police station during the day because at night it was chaos. A lot of firefights, a lot of payback. Um, we had, kind of secured, Iraq, if you will. There was no armored resistance. Really, before the insurgency started, it was just kind of like that chaos in between. And we're driving to the police station, and I'm in a soft skin Humvee with my reservists who are all cops in the States. We all volunteered to do this police mission. It was just chaos. Nothing we've been trained for, but we all were, law enforcement. So let's do this. And I was the senior guy, the team leader, and we're driving to the police station like we'd done several times. And I think I Googled the date. It's April, I want to say April 21st or April 22nd. I don't know this, but it was a big custom in Iraq on Saddam's birthday to shoot guns in the air. Like it's like the 4th of July. So we're driving and it's, I don't know, 08 in the morning and we're built up area. And all of a sudden, just gunfire erupts all around us. And I'm like, oh shit, get out of here, get out of here. I'm thinking we're in an ambush. And I'm waiting for rounds to come in, but I don't see or hear any. And then we haul ass out of there and we're, now trying to get to the police station because that's the closest secure spot from where we're at. We're in the town. And I don't know what's going on. But there's no shot holes. Everyone's okay. Hey, everyone good. We get to the police station and you're like, what the fuck? And everyone's kind of like all freaking out because this happened everywhere. It's almost like on cue. But that's what it was. We found out later that day. Oh, it's Saddam's birthday. Like that's what you do in Iraq. You fire AK in the air. You know, wasn't a real firefight, but I thought. And then I kind of during that deployment, it was chaos every night. We would go out and do some police work. We'd go hit a house, roll up a guy, and we would plan it well. We would surprise, never fire a weapon, but there's gunfire. Whether people shooting at us or just who knows, shooting their buddy because it's payback. But I was getting that stress inoculation. I remember at night we would sleep in a different spot, but it was a Ford. It was the actual Bath Party headquarters building, all pock marked up and blood on the ceiling from some Iraqi. I kind of like, wow, man, RPG comes in here. If I lose an arm, I'll be okay. I could still, I'd rather lose an arm than it's just crazy stuff going through your head. You know, I don't want to lose my legs because I like to run. I want to be mobile. Just, I never thought I was going to die. I just thought, yeah, I might get wounded. I might get banged up, but yeah, an arm, a finger. Don't want to lose my eyesight. You know, it's crazy. But I don't know if that answers your question. It was
No, it does, but it leads to another question: is do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Because too much stress inoculation, I think, can make you a little complacent.
Yeah, so that's a real thing. That I absolutely got complacent. Later on in my later missions, which was probably one that I was getting old. You know, I had to get a cheater out, a little magnifying thing to look at my GPS watch, you know, and the guys, they'll just bust your balls, when they see that, you know. Have you heard of operator syndrome? Have you heard
Yeah.
that term?
Yeah.
So first responders have it. I've read the books. I've read a lot about it. I have the symptoms. I have all of that. And while I like to think I was very well prepared, I was mature going into those environments. I've got a strong faith, strong support network, um, healthy. Yeah, it's a cumulative thing. TB, traumatic brain injury, heavy weapons, explosives, that cumulative effect of shock waves. Uh, it messes with you. My endocrine system is gooned up. I'm a disabled vet. I'm fortunate. I'm fully functioning as far as everything, but I got to take thyroid medicine and high blood pressure medicine and sleep apnea. And first responders get that. Cops have it, and it's something that in that world it will catch up with you. And everyone's different. Special ops guys are screened for that, so they have a very high tolerance. But man, you go that many times, it's going to get you. And then if you have an injury, that compounds it. I fortunately have never been blown up, and never been shot, so I don't have that trauma. I've never lost one of my buddies. Knock on wood, both my Marine team and my DEA Fast team, we all, came back without, significant injury. I've had other guys on Fast, and a good friend of mine on my team, once he left Fast, was killed in Colombia, um, which, that gets to you as well. You have friends you lose. I can't imagine being on the X and losing a guy. You know, so yeah, I mean, it catches up with everybody. Everyone uh, needs to learn to deal with it, accept it, and work through it. And I would tell you, your podcast has probably helped a lot of guys. I see that invariably the discussions all come back to this type of thing.
Yeah. Well, because I think here's my overview of it. I think that 20 years, 30 years of any kind of job like that changes you at a cellular level. I do. No matter what you try and get past ahead of the game or whatever, I still think it will change you in ways. And so when I ask questions like that, it's interesting to hear. When you answered that question just now, you said that it accumulated, but when do you think it accumulated? When do you think it finally got to you where you look back and you go, oh, yep, that's it?
So I will tell you the Marja experience, even the special ops guys will say they've never experienced anything like that just because of the extended time. It wasn't so much like the intensity of the firefight. It was over 4 days and 5 nights, and you were effectively surrounded. Uh, I had a weird manifestation of, I think, this stress. I want to say 2010. So I was still in fast. And for a period of 4 months, 6 months, I don't know what, I had this unbelievable sensation that I was going to crash in a flight. So flying on civilian airlines, Delta Airlines, I'm like, I had this, I've never had a fear of flying, never. I've rappelled out of helos, fast roped, helocasted, been in lots of different types of aviations, been in some near crashes. But all of a sudden, back in the States, this weird thing. And every time I flew, whether it was a DEA plane or a commercial plane, I would have this feeling. Um, you get, for me, my last deployment, I kind of got numb to it. That's where you talk about complacency.
Mm-hmm.
I did a wall charge because I just like blowing shit up, and I took a shortcut. I was working with Australian commandos with their EOD guys, and I didn't have my stuff. I ran out of my stuff. I was blowing up too much stuff. You prepare your charges. I was out. So, hey, can I use one of yours? Sure. Well, they do things a little different. And I hooked up one of their initiators to one of my charges, which is way hot. And the guys thought I killed myself because I was, I'm always the closest guy to the charge.
Of
And
course.
I fired it off, and yeah. And that was complacency, and it rung my bell. But you don't, it doesn't really catch, for me, it didn't catch up to me until I got out of that. And so I left fast in 2012, and then I got mobilized with the Marines and deployed on a special purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force with a very, it was a, not in a combat zone, but it was a training advisory type of thing. We had to do a train up through crisis response. I felt absolutely comfortable with all of that. We had a couple of real world things we had to respond to.
That
I
was in
enjoyed
Africa, correct?
Africa, yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
I had the hardship of being based in Sicily, so I'd fly down and see my teams once in a while. But it didn't really hit until after that, and a couple of years, and it really then hits you. When you retire. For me, I retired from DEA in 2017. So I've been fortunate. I've kind of had a gradual like letdown. A lot of guys go from, hey, I'm active duty or on the police force, and then you retire the next day. I had the Marines. Now, I wasn't doing anything crazy after that, but I stayed in the Marine Reserve for another 3 years, um, like doing typical officer job stuff. So it helped me kind of power down. But that's what all the stuff, the physical stuff started manifesting itself. My wife started, you know, thank God for her. I would have probably blown all this all off if it wasn't for her. But going to the doctor, sleep apnea, and all this other stuff that I've got going on.
There's there's two different questions that come to mind. One is, why do you think you stayed with the Marines so long after that? Because 3 years is a long time. Do you think that you knew in your mind, I got to get this slowdown time, I've got to get this reserve time in to kind of get in the place where I'm a civilian, but I'm still kind of doing that job out there? Or do you think it was just because you didn't know what to do with yourself whenever you got done?
Yeah, um I was so hooked into that. I would have the Marine Corps had to kick me out. I literally served till they're like, hey, time's up. You got to get out. You hit 30. So it wasn't that at all. I would have stayed in fast. I got frustrated with management. That's fast was absolutely my dream job. There's good and bad about every job. I
Of
love the
course.
Marine Corps. I love the culture of the Marine Corps. I love Marines. 30 years, you can't stay in beyond that unless you're a general. Um, I would have stayed in fast longer if I had been promoted. I at the point where I'm a senior guy. I know the job really well. I actually put in for promotion. I wanted to ride out my time in DEA in fast, as crazy that sounds. Um, but yeah, it wouldn't promote me, and I have my own theories on that. But as I went to a training, I went to the DEA Academy and did my last 5 years training guys. But it was a very, very meaningful program and meaningful job. And the my team, I mean, we seized $1 billion in drugs on one hit. That absolutely had to affect somebody. I didn't know what it did, but it had to. Um, so yeah, it worked out for the best for me the way it unfolded. It wasn't how I wanted. I think guys doing that type of thing that really are I hate to I don't lack of a better term, you get addicted to it. You really that adrenaline, the camaraderie you have, just physically, even though I was in my 40s, I was keeping up with these guys, you know. Now that I'm retired, it's like the wheels have fallen off. It's a struggle to, keep the weight off, but you have to, there's a time, right? And everyone has to find that, and you have to move on, and you got to figure out another purpose, another mission. And that's why I'm happy to talk to you, and I'm working with some folks on different things and see what the next
I've
step
got to
holds.
I've got to ask you though, with that, I can kind of tell it in your voice. Are you a little bitter that you spent the last 5 years at the training academy with everything that you had done, all you had given to the DEA? I understand that it's a fulfilling job. You're training the next generation, but was there at any time, was there ever, I don't know if you'd say an anger or, that I'm here now and I have so much more to give somewhere else?
You're pretty good. Pretty deductive. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Um,
how do you deal with that then? You're there for 5 years and you're at a desk and you're in classroom and stuff. That stuff can come out and boil over very easily when you have nothing to do but take your time thinking about that thing.
so, well, I had the Marines. I had the Marine Corps.
Okay.
This is how life is unpredictable, and you just have to drive. You have to never quit, have faith. So I missed out on promoting Insane and Fast, which in hindsight is probably a good thing because, we all have an odometer and we're running and gunning with Navy SEALs and Green Berets and Australian Commandos and the Special Boat Service. There's a point, I'm at that point, I think I was 45, 46. I'm kind of maxed out. Um, I had the opportunity. So when one door closes, another one opens. That old saying. I realized that the fast was coming to an end for dumb luck. I don't know. It is dumb luck. I threw in for a job in the Marine Reserves, a command job, a battalion commander based out of Baltimore. It's just up the road for 4th Combat Engineer Battalion. It is the only combat engineer battalion in the reserves for that supports division, which is what I preferred. Um, I got it, which I hadn't done the stuff you need to do with the reserves because I was so committed to fast, particularly, but DEA. You just like anything, there's an expectation you do these different jobs. An operations officer here, do this job here, to for the credentials to move up, and I didn't do that. But because of luck and timing, whatever, I got selected for that command, which is takes all your time. Even if I didn't mobilize, that happened in 2012. So the same year I left fast, I knew that was going to happen. So that helped. Back to what you're getting at, I knew that I had the Marines to fulfill me, and I still wanted to train uh, DEA agents, but then I had this other thing, and like you said, a lot of training, a lot of hard lessons learned. Well, then I take command, and then I see an opportunity to mobilize the unit to support this real world mission in Africa. The year after, well, I think it was just happening. I can't remember the time of this, but Benghazi, when Benghazi happened in 2012, we had the security mission the following year. So I felt very fulfilled. Now, I wasn't a DEA agent. I was back on active duty. I was mobilized for a year. We had a train up, and then we deployed for 6 months. So on September 11th, 2013, a year after Benghazi, which I think everyone knows about that, I had, this is unusual. The active duty, the big Marine Corps did not like how this unfolded, but it's just timing and bureaucracy of things. There was an active duty infantry company at the embassy in Tripoli guarding it. So if you reflect back on what happened in Benghazi, so now the year later, you had a company minus with mortars, anti-tank rockets, snipers, all of that. They had to answer to, because the way it was set up, the special purpose MAGTF commander, which was me. So that blew the minds of the active duty Marines. I saw some of the email traffic. There's an active duty infantry guy reporting to a reserve combat engineer at this forward deploy, because we were forward in Sicily. I had two C-130s assigned to us, and they forward staged a recon company with V-22s that literally were sitting on their bags waiting to deploy to respond to any threat to the embassy. There was probing event, we'll just call it, on the embassy. And I don't know, I wasn't privy to all the intelligence collection on that, but needless to say, nothing happened. Shortly thereafter, they then changed the command structure to where an active duty crisis response unit took over that responsibility. But for the first 2 months of deployment, that was my responsibility, my units. And then we had teams deployed everywhere who had to respond to crisis. So that helped. Then after that, so the Marine Corps helped. I guess it's a long answer to your question. The Marine Corps absolutely helped me through the cooling off, if you will, from the intensity of fast.
So the day you step away from everything, Marine Corps, fast, DEA, everything, what do you feel like? Do you remember?
Well, I had got divorced. So
Okay.
yeah, that was unexpected. And that
How long was that before you retired?
right before. So
Like months before?
months before, yeah.
Okay.
So actually, and when I say divorce, that's what my ex said on a divorce, 2 days after my birthday.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, not,
Happy birthday.
yeah, yeah. Um, Something wasn't right. I could tell something wasn't right a few months leading up to that. And I don't want to get into all that, of course, but
Right.
yeah, that completely derailed all the plans we had talked about. Because my goal was to retire, get a property maybe near Fort Bragg, because the connections I had, there are a lot of jobs there, maybe Tennessee. But that completely derailed everything. Huge crush on finances. Oh my gosh. I mean, wow. I went from, hey, I'm going to be able to retire to, yeah, no, I need a job. I could have stayed in DEA. I could have not retired, but I'm like, yeah, I'm done, for a lot of the reasons we talked about. And I had already started the process with the whole soft world. That's a, that is a network. And through a MARSOC Marine who I've known for years, he got me a really good job as a contractor. It was a fun job, paid really well, deployed, but I really didn't have time to reflect. I went from that, you go through that whole emotion of divorce, and, now I'm a single dad, and figuring out all that stuff, and just that trauma and I told everyone that was worse than any firefight. I would happily be shot at than go through that. Even though it all turned out for the best. I'm married to a wonderful woman, super supportive of me. Um, so, but a lot of pain and suffering going through that. So I went through this crazy job that had me deploy again, supporting special operations in Iraq. Um, Got to meet President Trump when he came out to visit, which was fun. And then I realized I can't deploy. I need to be home for my daughter. She was 15, I think, at the time, 14, 15. So I got a job in the DC area. So because of those other things, they kind of didn't let me really reflect. I had that drama, and it took a few years. And then when I met my wife, is probably when it started to really sink in. And I started a process of writing a book that was the other part of the plan. I'll write a book and, whatever, and start collecting notes and writing that. And then I had to work, and I couldn't write that and take the time for that. And, it's just unpredictable. I stumbled into all of these things. It wasn't the plan. None of it was the plan, really. Uh, but it's all worked out. It really has worked out. I wouldn't change a thing.
When you look back on your whole career, what do you think your proudest moment was?
Being commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps.
Really?
Yeah. Being a
I gotta
Marine,
ask.
becoming a Marine. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Becoming a Marine.
Okay. Over everything else that you ever did, everything that you led, being a second lieutenant, that was
Yeah,
it.
that was so. While I told you, being a fast, special agent operator, I was a breacher, I was a designated marksman, I was an assault team leader, got all these great schoolings. The job was second to none because I'm doing it. No one, I'm not directing, I am absolutely doing it. The
Right.
adrenaline rush, but the most fulfilling thing is being a Marine leader. It's irrelevant the rank. You know, I've been fortunate to lead at every rank. So from second lieutenant to colonel, but being a second lieutenant, you're with the guys. You're getting muddy. I was once told, lieutenant, your job is to be the best lance corporal. And, you know, not literally, but I got it. It's like do everything better than everyone or try to, you know, put them before yourself, learn and take care of them. And yeah, so that was probably the most fulfilling totally, as from every aspect. Because I got to do stuff as a second lieutenant. I got to, blow stuff up and run around in the jungle and, you know, go to crazy places. But yeah, I've been fortunate all along the way. I've met a lot of good guys and been very, very blessed.
Well, so now that you've got all this out of the way, you've got the contracting, all that kind of stuff. I think you've slowed down a little bit. That's why you started to do some podcasts and stuff. What do you think's going to be next for you?
So I've got a couple of side hustles. One that
Okay.
actually pays, and I guess you can have a side hustle and not pay.
That's
And
always
that's
good.
fine because you got to stay busy. You can't just sit at home. My wife works
100%.
way harder than I ever did. Um, I'm an expert witness for attorneys through a company expert institute, and that's a whole crazy story how they found me. Um, and that's predominantly lawsuits, civil lawsuits, and it's law enforcement tactics and procedures is really my expertise. I'm helping a friend out who has a startup company called Fox 2 Sierra, and he started it in New York as a active shooter response training solution for houses of worship, but it has expanded a great deal. He was in the IDF when he was young, so he has connections over in Israel, and he is helping them, the kibbutzes, with their defense, and he's using technology with tactics, and he has partnered with a lot of former special ops guys. So I'm helping him with that. With my background, I am working on a book, and Scott's helping me. I think our mutual friend Scott is helping with that, and Fred is giving me some advice, and I will continue driving on that way harder than anything else I've done. Um, and you know, being here to help my friends and network in anything they're pursuing. I've done some unusual things since post government, and if I can help them, figure it out, kind of had to do it myself and ran the gamut. I actually I don't think I put this on anything I sent you, but I worked for Raytheon for a while as a cybersecurity engineer. Unbelievable pay, not fulfilling at all for me.
Somehow that doesn't sound strange. You now, I will say though, you are hooked up with two guys, Scott and Fred, and they've got that world of the books and all that stuff kind of figured out.
Yeah, Scott is mentoring me, so we'll see where that goes. And times are, like I said, my life has been unpredictable. I can't really predict what's going to happen, but I just know I'm not going to just sit at home and, do yard work. Which,
That's probably a good thing.
yeah.
All right, let's talk about where everybody can find you. Social media. There's not a lot out there. Social media, websites, anything like that, where people, if they want to know more about your story or anything like that, they can get in contact with you.
Yeah. So the life I've lived, the quiet professional is a very real thing. It's taken me years to get comfortable to even do a podcast. So right now, all I have is LinkedIn. My buddy's company, Fox 2 Sierra, there's a mechanism to get a hold of me through that. Obviously, that company is there for anybody seeking training or consultation on any kind of threat. Uh, and I would obviously help out with that. But that's it for now. You're going to know how to get a hold of me, and
Yeah.
uh, some other folks I've had a pleasure of talking with, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully, I think this year is going to be a really good year for all of us in a lot of ways. Very optimistic.
I hope so. Man, I'm so incredibly honored that you did this. I know that we got tangled up yesterday and everything, but you came on today, and I'm so appreciative of it. You have a fantastic story. I think it's a story that a lot of people don't hear. They think about DEA being here in America and not really overseas and things like that. So it's a really incredible thing to hear. There's more of them, I'm sure, to come down the road, so we can hear some more stories from those foreign deployments. Guys, you know where you can find Tom. Let's talk about where you can find me. As always, you can find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD podcast, and you can find me on YouTube, where all these conversations are in video form. But your one-stop shop is dtdpodcast.net. There's going to be extra pictures of Tom on there. There's going to be links where you can get a hold of him, all of that kind of stuff. You can also check out his episode in either video or audio form, and it will give you every single place that we are located. As always, I got to ask you guys, if you like this kind of stuff that we're doing, please share, like, and subscribe. Be a friend, tell a friend, all of those kind of things. It's really important to help grow the show. We're trying to grow to 10,000 before the end of this year, and we would really appreciate you helping out there. Also, make sure you check out my buddy Hoot over at nomadicresearch.com. If you want stuff to make you look cool, listen, I'm getting ready to take a trip, and I'm using my Nomadic Research bag. I got an entire week and a half's worth of clothes in that with leftover space in it. It's fantastic. The shirts, the t-shirts, the hoodies, the hats, the backpacks, everything that they have is so great. Nomadicresearch.com. And if you private message me, I'll let you get a code that will give you a discount on your stuff over there. Guys, that's going to be it for this week. Make sure you go check out our sponsors, check out everything that we talked about here, and check out some more about Tom. That's Tom. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later.